the program and what the course catalog is, but also research the professors and what their interests are, because that will tell you a lot about the kind of mentorship that you'll receive. So did I answer all your questions? Oh, and then preparation, you have to like take a test, of course. You should practice for your test. Apply for any sorts of merit-based financial aid, need-based financial aid. That's easy to get, especially at the grad school level. That's easier to get at the grad school level than the undergraduate level, because you can be a research assistant or a teaching assistant to help offset some of the costs without having to take a huge student loan burden.
Awesome, thank you. Shifting over to Rachel, can you talk a little bit about the CPA exam and what that process was like for you, and maybe any advice you would give to people that are looking to get their CPA license?
Yeah, so I took my CPA license 13 years ago, so the process has changed a bit, but I understand it's still as hard as it ever has been. So it's one of those things that, like, by the time you're done and you look back, you're like, wow, I can't, like, I can't believe I did that. It's 4 parts, and I think the parts have changed a bit, but there's like a tax section, an audit section, financial accounting section, and then like a business ethics section. And depending on who you are and what you like, each section could, you might find each section harder than the other. But in terms of, I guess, first of all, is it worth it? Yes. In my opinion, it is. Having the 3 little letters CPA after your name kind of gives you, instant credibility. People know that the CPA is a hard thing to attain. You have continuing education requirements. So I have a CPA in 3 different states right now, because I was required to have one in every state I was practicing in at Deloitte. So it's definitely worth it, and it's something once you pass the CPA exam, I mean, you've passed it, right? I mean, it's you keep up with your continuing education, but it is a very big career milestone that you should be very proud of doing, because it's hard. It's not an easy test. I cried after my first one. Like, I studied so hard. I took my test. I remember I was driving home and my parents called and they were like, how did it go? And I just started crying. I was like, that was the hardest thing I just couldn't believe. I passed somehow, but it was difficult. But I mean, if you go to work for a Big 4, or I think this is any kind of public accounting firm, you are limited if you don't pass the CPA. You can't get, at least the Big 4, Deloitte, which is what I'm familiar with, you can't get to manager if you don't have your CPA. So it can limit you if you don't get it in certain circumstances. Where I'm at now, my boss doesn't care that I have a CPA. He cares about my background, kind of. So it's not like I had to have a CPA to get this job, but my CPA, it like empowered me to get all the experiences that I needed to get this job, if that makes sense. So I think it's really important. And anyone who's thinking about taking it, I would absolutely encourage you to. My advice would be, you need to dedicate time to studying. Like, no matter how well you did in your college courses, it is a very difficult test. The questions are worded a certain way. It covers a ton of topics. You're timed. It's a high pressure situation. So you need to carve out time, and you need to effectively communicate to your friends and family to leave you alone. Like, listen, I'm studying. I can't, like, I'm sure I had this conversation with Kristyn at some point. Like, I can't go out tonight. I've got to study for the CPA exam. Like, so you need to set boundaries, because otherwise it's going to creep up on you. And I would say, get it over with as fast as you can. I had some people who dragged it out for, years, and I'm pretty sure the exams expire. Like, once you pass one, you have a clock until that first one expires, and you've got to take it over again. At least I'm pretty sure that's how it worked when I was doing it. So if you're thinking about it, just do it. Like, sit down, study for, a few months, get it over with. Because the longer you drag it out, the more painful it's going to be. But again, it's, in my opinion, totally worth it, and something that you can always put on your resume then for, the rest of your life. So.
Lauren, if I can jump in just to piggyback from
I
her.
was just gonna ask you to jump in. Go ahead.
You'll hear me say that I don't have many regrets over the course of my career, but not pushing through on that CPA exam is one of them. And again, I at the time, I didn't really have anybody kind of guiding me. Your advice that you just gave, Rachel, had I heard that at the time, it would have made all the difference in the world for me. I just knew that I probably wasn't going to stay in public accounting. So therefore, why would I need a CPA exam? And you're right, it absolutely does completely set you apart. Doesn't matter what kind of position you're looking for, if it's accounting based, and even in a lot of cases in management types of positions like the CFO, like it helped me that I worked for a public accounting firm. And of all the experience I have on my resume, and there's 5 or 6 places, and I've never been anywhere less than 3 to 5 years. But that public accounting experience that I had right out of college is probably the most critical when somebody picks up my resume and looks at it, even today, 20, 25 years later. The perk for me is because I started there, even though I didn't get through the exam, I had passed parts of it. And I just kind of was like, I'm over it. The longer you take to get through it, the harder it gets. I thought maybe once I got some experience doing audits and seeing some things, instead of just looking at it book work, that the real life experience would kind of give me a better focus on it. And it really didn't, because life started to happen for me and then it was not a focus. So if I have one career regret, it's that I should have stuck through that, gotten through that. So, hindsight's 20/20, I guess they say, but, I just kind of dismissed it. It was my excuse to not have to study, I guess, was, well, I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm not sticking in auditing, and I'm certainly not going to do taxes. But I do wish anybody headed into accounting, it's definitely worth the investment in time. Get yourself into a CPA review class if you have that opportunity. Practice exams, all those things are key and critical. And it's certainly changed since I sat for it too many years ago. But it's do it. You won't regret it. You'll say, I wish I would have. You'll never say, oh, I didn't need that. It's worth it.
Awesome, thank you. Next question, and again, we can go in whatever order you guys would like to respond. What has been like the biggest challenge of your career? How have you gotten through it, and how has it helped you to grow as a professional and an individual? Again, whoever wants to go first.
I'll take the easy stereotypical answer. I would say deciding when to start a family was the hardest one for me, because that meant, like, I'm not going to say my career took a back seat, but there's only 24 hours in the day. And if now some of those hours are dedicated to childcare, child rearing, changing diapers, all the things, that just leaves fewer hours available in your day to advance your career. I'm very fortunate that my company was flexible and we had all sorts of benefits available. You could be out for maternity leave, and they had really good facilities for when you came back to work. And I had a really fantastic mentor at the time who made sure to have everybody work around my schedule, and that was great. And if I hadn't had that, it would have been much harder for me to stay at work than it was. She made it flexible for me. This is, in the time before remote working was possible at my company. So she made it possible for me to log on from home more, and she was more flexible with my schedule. And if I hadn't had that benefit, I don't know if my career would have ended up where it is now. So that was pretty tough. And then making coming back to work a priority. When you're off is generous. When you're off on maternity leave, you're like, you have all this, I at least had all this guilt, like, oh, maybe I should stay home with my kid, maybe I should get back to work. But I personally find a lot of enjoyment out of coming to work and out of doing work and being, mentally challenged, mentally stimulated, learning. And I like to have the balance between my work life and my personal life. But that's probably the biggest challenge that I had in my career. Maybe second to that would be telling my company that I was going to move and be like, can I still work for you? Are we cool with this? Because again, this was, 4 years ago, I guess, maybe 5 years ago now. I guess almost 4 years ago. And like Lauren said, like we weren't really doing a lot of Zoom calls. We weren't doing video calls. So I was one of 2 remote employees at the company of roughly 500 people. And the other one was like a founder. So they made an exception for me. And then I felt a lot of pressure to be available all the time because I was the one person who wasn't in the office. But I'm pretty proud of the fact that I forced our adoption of Teams early so that we were all ready when, like, pandemic hit and everybody went to Teams. We had already made some of those transitions, and my whole team had video because I was remote. So it was much easier for my team in particular to make the transition to pandemic life. But advocating for yourself, feeling like you are entitled is maybe the wrong word, but advocating for what you need to your management versus only letting it be top down. That was a hard skill for me to learn, but without that, I wouldn't have been able to carve out the place that I have carved out today. So, I mean, maybe those are 3 things.
Kind of maybe echoing that a bit. I'm not a mom, but at Deloitte, we worked hard, and I had never had an issue working hard or even like busy season. I was never really bothered by busy season because like I had my friends and family trained that you're not going to see me till May, and that's fine. It's like Western PA, the weather's not even good until May anyway. Like, what were we going to do anyway? And then, I mentioned I went to national offices. That was literally the best 3 years of my career so far. Like, it was just such a cool experience to be sitting in that space, kind of protected a bit, learning all that. And then I mentioned I transitioned into an advisory role, and it was with a practice within the firm that was just growing and getting off the ground. And so that was cool to like help build the practice and say I was a part of this new service line that we were creating and whatever. And I had a couple cool opportunities. I went to Finland for 2 months and worked there, which was awesome. But over time, it got to a point where I just realized the practice was not getting the attention that I thought we needed in order to be successful, and that there was a lot of pressure being put on me as the most senior person in the group that was not a partner. We didn't even have any partners in the group. I was the most senior person in the group to like keep this thing afloat. And I kind of had my blinders on because I was told I was on partner track, and I was on partner track. Like, I actually went through the process, did my presentation, like did the background checks and the credit checks and like all this crazy stuff they do to partners in public accounting. And, but I was super unhappy. Like, I'd never cried at work before, and I was crying regularly, sobbing on Zoom calls to anyone, really, anyone who asked how I was doing. I like wouldn't lie. I would just like start crying and be like, I haven't slept, I haven't eaten, and it took me almost a year of being really unhappy to realize, what am I doing this for? Like, I was like so focused on getting promoted to partner that I didn't step back and say, what is that going to do for me? I'm still going to be just as busy and miserable and trying to build this practice that no one else cares about right now. And sure, I might get paid a little bit better for it, but now I'm signing my name to things and saying I am ultimately responsible for this. And I realized, pump the brakes. Like, this isn't what I want. I want to be able to spend time with my friends and family. I want to be happy in my career, and a title that I would just like kind of plopped in front of me, and I just assumed like, all right, this is the next step, this is what I'm going to do, wasn't worth it. So that and then it just so happened, it was great timing that UiPath came to me and offered me this opportunity. I was not looking. I was trying to talk myself into getting promoted and then figuring it out from there. But it took me 9 months to convince myself it's okay not to want partner at Deloitte. It's okay not to want the title. It's okay not to want that lifestyle. Like, even though that's what everyone was pushing on to me, it's okay to step back and say no. So when I gave my 2 weeks notice, I like blew everyone's minds, but it was, once I made the decision, I like felt this sounds really corny, but it's so true. I felt like so at peace. And so I think, you know, we talked about moving geographically and stuff. I didn't move geographically. I'm still in the same place I was before, but moving jobs, I mean, that was harder for me than moving locations, because I felt like part of me felt like, well, I failed because I didn't make it to partner at Deloitte, and that's what everyone thought I was going to do, and that's what I thought I was going to do. So I think, you know, it wasn't really a professional challenge. It was a personal challenge for me to like get over my pride and make a decision that was going to make me happy personally, professionally, you know, all of those things. So I don't know, I would say you know, sometimes I think we can all get in our heads, and people tell us what their vision of our careers are. And like, you really need to own your own path and be confident about what you want personally, professionally, all that stuff. And it took me longer to realize that than I would have liked, but I'm glad I got there.
I think that's super, super insightful, like for all people starting in their careers, because just like you get anchored to geography, like you sunk 13 years into Deloitte, right? So you're like, oh, all this time. I felt the same way with Resurgent at times, like 9 years. It's harder. It is harder for me. Obviously, I move around all the time. It's harder for me to think about leaving a company than leaving a location. And to your point about being deliberate about what you want in your career, you actually have to carve that time out too, to say, like, if you are just going into work every day, you'll just keep doing the same thing, and new people will add meetings to your calendar and new things will come up, and you'll be like swimming along, and then you're 5 years in. If you don't specifically carve out time to set your goals of, this is what I want, this is how I want to get it, this is who I have to tell, because if you're not communicating what you want to the people above you, then they don't know. They're just going to give you the work that they think gets you to where they think you should be, rather than creating a track. Especially at small and medium-sized companies, there is no training plan. There is no ongoing development. You know, I know Rachel has had the benefit of like Deloitte University, where they have like ongoing trainings. That doesn't exist at smaller companies, and you have to be deliberate about what you want in your path and what you want for your own development.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with actually what everybody is saying. Like I look back in my career, because I've had I really have had a stellar career so far, and I just think that the biggest hurdle I had probably was more when I was younger, in my 20s, 30s, probably even in my early 40s, is just riding that roller coaster of what exactly Rachel said. Like, everybody thinks the title is the most important thing, and who can get to the top the fastest. And what I found in the banking industry, but I'm sure it's similar everywhere else, is that everybody else is chasing that same dream. But the majority of people really don't have that dream, but they don't know they don't have it. So what happens is that you have so many people on that roller coaster, and that's when you really get, and I'm sure you see this within every industry, you get a lot of the backstabbing to happen whenever you get to that executive management, that C-level. You know, everybody's trying to get to the top, but I've never seen so many unhappy people who are at the top. And I just really had to collect myself in my 40s to really kind of do what exactly Rachel said, is that what the hell am I doing? I mean, do I really even, I mean, what do I want to do? What I knew I wanted to do is I wanted the heck out of retail. And I knew that I really loved working with businesses. So, you know, I just took the bull by the horns, and and stuff happened that was volatile to my move in getting there. And it has done nothing but work out for the best. But sometimes it takes a while to figure out, number one, what do you want to do? And then you do have your outside forces about, okay, are you going to get married? Are you going to have kids? Because push comes to shove, it's still a really important decision for women. And, you know, I don't have children, but I just know with working with all female colleagues, you know, being a mother and also in a corporate career, it's hard to manage sometime. And you have to make those decisions as to, are you going to be comfortable with the decision that you're going to be making whenever you're laying in bed at night thinking about your life? And I just think in your 20s and 30s, you have a lot of stuff hitting you. And the only thing that I can say is really pay attention, like Rachel said, pay attention to what you want to do and what makes you happy. And then figure out what your track is, because your track 5 years from now may be totally different than what you thought you were going to do. And I don't have any regrets, because I think every past experience was a really good learning experience for me. So I'm never going to call anything a regret, but I really had a great amount of learning opportunities that really now I can fine tune a lot faster in my, I guess in my next phase of life, which, I'm going to be doing a lot of different things now, and I have been, which I wouldn't even been thinking about doing in my 20s or 30s. So I just couldn't agree more that it's not really worrying about the company that you work at anymore and having people figure out what you should be doing. It's going with what Crystal said or Kristyn said, which is figure out what you want to do and communicate from bottom up, because nobody will know really what's in your head unless you communicate it to the right people. And whether they agree or not, that's your fork in the road to make a decision as to what you want to do with your life moving forward. So that's kind of just what I'm thinking with hearing the conversation.
And not to stereotype, but like chances are your male colleagues are probably speaking up. So you should too.
I could not agree with you more. It's even though generation after generation after generation, you still speak about that, men and women are still just a little bit different around that boardroom. And you are exactly right, Rachel. I think women are still a little bit, they feel inhibited for some reason, which they shouldn't feel inhibited whatsoever. But it's still, even though it's a stereotype, I still see it. So, call it to what it is, right?
Yeah.
As I look back, I can't say any one thing sticks out for me as far as challenges and pushing out of my comfort zone, other than the most recent change that I made, as I indicated earlier. It had been in my mind for a while. So as I settled in at the newspaper, we went through a number of transitions. I was there during the Y2K. You young people won't know about this, but it was a big deal back at the Y2K. So we, the world was going to come to an end. We had systems to convert and all kinds of things. There was one challenge after another for us. We had multiple system implementations. We were a beta site for some software companies along the way. We had a change in corporate ownership. We were bought and sold a couple times over the years. The Ogden family, Nutting family that owns it now, they were remarkable when they came in. And so there were times that I spoke up and said, you know what, I'm bored. We looked at actually moving to Carolina at one point. Lauryn was in the first grade, and one of my prior publishers had set up shop down there, and I was going to take a position, and we ended up not, for some personal reasons. My husband was in the middle of transition and stuff then too. But in that time of transition, I realized that the time up until that point, while I was growing somewhat in my career, I wasn't growing to the level that I thought that I should be. And that came to light for me as I was trying to update my resume to look for another position. So, we had some conversation here at the house, kind of decided we were going to kind of settle in for family. My parents were getting older. My husband's parents were getting older. We wanted to be close to them. And some level, they wouldn't really be able to travel to visit us much. It would be us, coming back home. And I don't regret that decision. But what I did as a result was I talked to my boss at the time and said, look, I'm bored. Like, I need more to do. It's become this mundane month after month, closing the same. We're doing the same thing. I had the same team built. It was a strong team. I could leave the office for a week and not worry at all about what was going on. I knew they had things covered. But what they ended up doing then was giving me more locations. They took some of the things actually out of their corporate office and brought it to me regionally to cover other newspapers and do more books, so we grew more things. So it was very good for me then, but it was hard for me to speak up. I had a really good relationship with my boss. He was a phenomenal mentor. I used to call him Papa. He was like, I used to tell him he used to be a pastor, or should be a pastor, because he just had that calming method about him and the way he managed. And he was very good about letting us kind of run our departments the way we felt we needed to run them. He was not a micromanager, and that was awesome for those of us that kind of, blossomed our careers under his leadership, because not only we learned from him, but he let us make mistakes if we needed to make mistakes so we could learn from them. So that was a really big thing for me to speak up, and it helped me get through those times of Lauryn going through school. But as she was in high school, I knew it was time for me to start to grow me again. And I didn't know what that was going to look like. I mean, I was, certainly going to travel here. Merle and I talked about if we needed to relocate again, my husband. And, he's 12 years older than I am. So he's nearing retirement. So for him to find another position at his place in life is different than me. But I knew I would rather be looking for another position to grow my career at the age of 50 than at 60 or 62. So it was just the right time as Lauryn graduated. And to make things kind of a little bit more tedious, my boss, who was the publisher at the time, he passed away unexpectedly, or somewhat unexpectedly, the year that she graduated. So it kind of forced my hand. I was either going to, try to work with somebody new in that position, or see what I could do to just step out of my comfort zone. So I did that. I stepped out of my comfort zone. It was hard. Like I used to say, I want the boardroom. I want to be able to go in and present the financials to the board, not just a private company, because it was private. So it was a big step. I remember and Lauryn can attest to this, I was a basket case going into my first few board meetings because, I got this board of directors looking at me. The numbers were not good, folks. I don't know why. I just got here. So, and it was foreign. I was like refreshing myself with a nonprofit, and I said to my husband a couple of weeks into it, like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like, I went from knowing newspapers inside and out and knowing those financials and what we needed to do and not having to think about it, to all of a sudden there's all these acronyms and these funding sources. And it was a whole learning process for me. So, and I'm still learning. Like, there's times I still stop people in conversation, like, wait, what is that? Because a lot of it's the mental health and behavioral health. But it's been good. Like, I wouldn't change it. As much as I was uneasy doing it, I was excited and scared at the same time. But pushing yourself, being willing to take that chance, and having the confidence in yourself to figure it out. I've worked really hard since I've gotten there. The person that's my accounting manager, she's been there for 10 years. She's very smart. She's very much knows the business, but she's just not sure that she ever wants to have that CFO role. And she said to me the one day, like, what do you do when you're CFO? You've got nobody to go to ask that question of. That's what I was experiencing when I got there. I didn't have a corporate office to call all of a sudden. The buck stops here, folks. And so I had to figure that out. But, if there's really things that I'm really just not 100% sure of, I get a hold of our public accounting firm and just run them by them. Like, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I think. When you come in for the audit, how does this look? And they've been great. So they've certainly been a resource for me, and I don't feel like I'm stuck out in the middle of nowhere without any resources by any means. But definitely, it was a trying time, but I wouldn't change it. Kind of as Megan said, even the things that were a struggle, and I maybe looking back might have done them differently. I don't know that it wouldn't have brought me anywhere different to where I am. You learn from your mistakes, and sometimes the more you make, the more you learn. I don't know, but you just have to be willing to take that chance.
Awesome. And then the last question that I'm going to ask you guys before we open the floor to questions is, if you could go back, give any piece of advice to your younger self, what would that be?
Can I go first? Because I already said it. Pass the darn CPA exam, Beth. Geez, oh man, you can do it. Just study. And I guess in hindsight, maybe had I not done that, I haven't completely rolled out the MBA again, or yet, even at my age. But I think I did start to pursue an MBA, and was going through a divorce, and I tabled it as a result. So I never went back after it. So one or the other. I guess if you don't do the CPA and you're in the accounting world, decide that accounting is maybe not going to be your main focus, but at least pick up an MBA. And I don't say at least as in like that's the backup plan, but they're both equally difficult for sure. But it's just that extra credential beyond the bachelor's degree. You can't ever get too much education, and it never stops. Like, even after you get those, like Rachel said, the CEUs and all those types of things, it's just critically important. We're never done learning.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned mine as well. So one of them is, I wish I would have spoken up more when I was younger in my career. And, I had great male and female, mostly male actually, mentors in Pittsburgh. There weren't any female partners in Pittsburgh. But I also had some good friends that I started with who were male, and they were very blatant and blunt that they wanted to make partner from like year one. And I was just like, you're crazy. Like, why would you say that? No one knows that. But I should have been, I mean, I should have been saying it too, because they got opportunities that maybe I didn't, because I never spoke up and said, I want those opportunities, give me those opportunities. I just assumed if I did a good job, they'd be given to me. And that's not how it works. Whether, you know, no matter how fair that sounds, like that's not how it works in the real world. So you need to ask for things. I'm much better now about doing it, because I know male and female colleagues are doing it. So I would say I wish I would have started doing that a lot earlier. And then I wish I would have done an international rotation. I think like I mentioned, I did 2 months in Finland on a short-term project, and it was, again, an awesome personal experience, but it was also great just to see how global businesses are run, and like even how awesome the European work style is. Like, no one works on the weekends and everyone's gone by 6. It was phenomenal. Like, I didn't know what to do with them with my free time. So I wish I would have done like a year or 2 kind of rotation internationally, just because it was great to see different culture, different business practices, see a global company. So if you ever have the chance to do that in your career and you're interested in that kind of thing, I would say totally go for it.
Similar, like speaking up for yourself, it's a hard balance too. If you find yourself listening to this and you're like, oh, okay, it is a hard balance, because you have to walk a line of like speaking up but also being credible. And I feel like that's where my line, I found difficulty speaking up early in my career, you know, in my early 20s, because like, well, I don't know anything. But I wish I would have started somewhere in my earlier 30s, where like I had built credibility. People were giving me opportunities, so like they knew that I could do things. And I was, like Rachel said, waiting for people to give me more money, waiting for people to give me more titles, instead of asking for that and carving out, like I said, carving out that deliberate, like, what do I want? And I would say that applies to both professional and personal. Like, I'm taking care of the kids. Well, I want to go to happy hour. Like, I don't want to be home. Like, hey, you take the kids tonight. So like, I would say that applies broadly. Communicating what you want and advocating for yourself applies both in your personal and professional career. And taking more chances, I suppose. I had the opportunity to study abroad internationally, but I took like 18 credits instead of taking 12 credits like a normal human being. I spent all my study abroad time maximizing my credit load instead of maximizing my opportunities. Like, what was I thinking? So I would say that maybe, I think I had one more, but those would be my biggest regrets, I guess. Take more risks. I'm super risk averse. Take more risks, and advocate for yourself more earlier.
I would probably say, totally agree with you, Kristyn. I was probably like in your 20s and very early 30s, you're still learning the ropes. I mean, there's just so much information that you're learning that, and there's a very thin line between making sure you know when you're ready, but like you feel confident that you do sound very credible, and you know, maybe that isn't until you're low to mid 30s. Who knows? I mean, I think it depends upon the industry, who you're working with, who your boss is. What I have found is that throughout your whole career, or thinking of my career, you know, you have, you know, many bosses that have changed in your whole career. And you're probably going to find out, because this is just the analytics of it, is that a very small percent is probably going to be still the 20-80 rule, which 20% of your bosses are going to be awesome. The other 80% are going to be probably subpar. And those are the ones that I think networking around that, to be able to be more outspoken and really, if you're going to own your career and what you want to end up doing, then you have to be able to be agile in regards to working with your good bosses, which are going to be very small and thin, to how do you manage up with your bosses that really aren't providing what you need them to provide you for your career. And even to this day, I think that that's just an obstacle, because in my 30-year career, I probably have had over 15 bosses, and 3 of them I have respected hands down without a problem. So knowing that, it's just how you voice your concerns and your opinions, because remember, at the end of the day, it's your career and it's your life. And then one of the last thing I think I'll mention is that in my early 20s and 30s, and probably my early 40s, like I worked 50, 60 hours a week consistently on the weekends, because I just thought that was just your unheard expectation, that if you wanted to get ahead, to get that whatever title that is, that people would see that. And that's just not the case. I think I froze. That's just not the case anymore, where I think, at the end of the day, whenever you're about ready to pass away and you relook at your life, I think you have to relook at, were you happy in all phases of your life versus just your career. So I'm not sure if you heard me, but that's what I said.
Your video froze, but we heard you. Thank you all. This has been great advice. Kristyn, did you have something else to add?
I thought of my other thing, and Megan made me think about it. It was networking. Like, build your network early, because you might, like, I fell victim to, like, I don't need to take that sales call because they're not selling a product that I want. But then, especially now in the world of LinkedIn, like, they might not be useful to you now, and you might not care what they're selling, but they might move 4 times, and now they're a really great contact at somewhere you want to know something more about. So take the opportunities to network as they come up. Like, I was uncomfortable. I'm more of an introvert. I was uncomfortable, like, socializing and talking to strangers, right? But just get comfortable with it. Practice it if you have to. Talk to random people on the street, even if it's uncomfortable, because that is a really valuable skill, to be able to talk to strangers. Strike up a conversation, because they might know something that is really useful to you, and they might be cool.
Awesome. Great advice. Thank you. With the last 15 minutes or so that we have, I will open the floor to questions. Feel free to unmute and ask questions if you'd prefer to type questions in the chat box. I am monitoring the chat, and we'll go from there. Don't be shy. I've seen a couple of you unmute. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them.
I have a question.
Awesome.
I really like everybody's panel, but the panelists I like the most is yours, Rachel, yours, Kristy, and Miss Megan. Miss Megan, she reminds me so much of my mother, actually. She really does, because I'm all a big advocate for, like, just fighting for what you want, and just learning what you want in your career goals, and not really caring about how other people may look at you as. And with your statement, Miss Megan, it reminds me of my mother, because she's in law enforcement. She's been in law enforcement now for I want to say 30 something years, because I just turned 30. So at the job I work at now, I like where Miss Megan says sometimes people that are up top, like CEOs and directors, they're really the most miserable people. And I can vouch for that. I definitely agree, because I have a miserable supervisor I've worked with. So she tries to make everybody else's life miserable except mine, because I don't really care what she thinks, because I know what my goals are in life and what I need to do. But I really like your idea, Miss Krista, because you said something that really touched me. You said home is where your family is. Home is where your family is. And because my mom is my best friend, and she's 67, and we're close. We're so close. We do everything together. Like, literally, I call her every day at work. Like, I call her 6 times a day, even though we live together. But I said, Mom, what do you think of this idea? Do you like that idea? Do you like this idea? And she said, Maya, we'll talk later. And I'm so used to asking my mom for advice. So it's really, it really helps me a lot. But I like all your ideas.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Maya. Paige, did you have something?
Yes, please. Okay, so my name's Paige, and I'm an upcoming sophomore at Westminster, majoring in accounting. And I had planned to major in accounting and finance to sit for the CPA exam following my 4th year, but now I'm reconsidering and thinking of majoring in accounting to graduate in 3 years and then going for a master's and then possibly sitting for the CPA exam after. Do you guys have any input on whether you think it's a good idea to go about the 4 years with the double major or 3 years with the master's and then sitting if I decide to after that? Because I'm not looking to go into public accounting, I don't believe. I think I want to go more towards a project management route. So that's why I was kind of veering away from the CPA route, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so what I would say is, and again, I'm biased because I have it, right? But if you can do it and get it done early, it's going to set you apart on your resume from everyone else that doesn't have it. So people are going to know, first of all, it's impressive, right? It's a hard exam, whatever. People are going to know, like, okay, so she's dedicated, like she can sit down and focus her mind on something and pass something. And by the way, she probably knows a thing or two about accounting.
Cut out. I did not hear any of that.
Oh no, can everyone else hear me? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. No, so what I was saying was I think if you're even thinking about it, I would encourage you to do it, because it's going to set you apart on your resume, and it's going to give you, that credibility that you've done it and you have it. And it might open up doors for you in the future. So even though you might want to go into, XYZ career now, in the future, you might realize, well, I'd like to get this kind of experience, and, having the CPA might help you, help you get there. One thing I will say is, accounting, I feel like sometimes accounting gets a bad rap because people think it's like, debits and credits and it's nerdy and all that kind of stuff. And it is. But it also, like, it is, and I've heard this term before, and I think it's a little like cliche, but it's true. It is the language of business. So like, if you can understand accounting, then you can understand what types of business decisions need to be made, and how a certain contract is going to affect a company's financial statements, which investors and creditors and whomever rely on. So having that background is just, in my opinion, going to make you a better overall business person. Now, if you're not, but if the CPA is not for you, then, that's fine too. But if you're even thinking about it, I would say go for it and do it, and do it as soon after college as you can, because you are in a studying mindset now, right? Like, you probably have a routine and you go to the library and study, or you have a study spot or whatever, and you're in that mode. Like, as Beth was kind of saying, the longer you get away from that, the harder it's going to be to get back into that study mode and to really focus on it. So if you're even thinking about it, I would say go for it and get it over with as soon as you can, because it is painful. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that.
Paige, something else to think about that I was thinking about when I was kind of thinking through that whole plan too, is cost a factor for you? Because it very much was for me. Because Westminster offers the 150 in 4 years, I was automatically at an advantage, because Westminster tuition was cheaper for me than having to go through a master's program where you may not get the scholarships and the financial aid and those types of things. So that's something else that you may want to consider when you're thinking about that.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
I wanted to add this too, and Rachel really hit on something here that I think you're right as far as the accounting mindset. And Lauryn laughs at me because there's times I'm like, look, I just want to sit in my office today and review some financial reports and maybe write a couple of journal entries and do some analytical. I spend so much of my day doing, and I've always said anybody going into accounting or management should really have a minor in psychology, because if you're dealing with people, you need to understand them, and it should be a required part of the curriculum in undergrad. It's like the doctor is in, you get the Lucy sign because somebody has to come in and vent about something. And it's just part of management. And it's not a bad thing, but trying to help people grow their careers while you're growing yours, because, you have people that report to you. So if you're managing a department, that becomes a part of your day. I love accounting, I love math, but I really don't spend a lot of my time doing that on a day-to-day basis. It's more of an overall critical thinking, analyzing, like they've alluded to, you know, looking to see what the impact is of things. And certainly that accounting background and understanding the flow of the financial reports, like very rarely, I've got 2 CPAs on my board of directors, which is awesome because they also can be a sounding board for me at times, but that's very unusual. And so while I'm giving a report to our board of directors, I'm talking to the other 10 members of the board that don't have any accounting background whatsoever and having to explain what the impact is of the decisions that we've made during the course of the month. And so, you know, I just kind of put that out there too for you to be thinking about. So, you know, even though accounting maybe isn't what you want, having that strength of accounting background and understanding the numbers and how things flow, it's important. And I say go for it. If you've got that inspiration, you can't go wrong. You know, you just can't go wrong with it. So.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Theia, did I say that right? Your hand raised? Awesome.
Yes. Hello. I'm a first-year CPA major at GCC, and I had a question in regards to seeking mentorship, so that it requires that once you've completed your course, how did you guys go about seeking your mentors?
Mine kind of came naturally for me because they were the people that I worked with the most at first. And then as my career progressed and I had some more exposure to people, I tried to pick people who at least seemed like they had a career path and a life that I would want. So honestly, like I mentioned, I had no female partners at Deloitte to really look up to initially, but when I moved to New York, I did have female partners. And so for me, it was natural that I sought out, I asked them, can we go to lunch? I'd love to hear your story and how you got here and what kind of advice you can give to me. So I naturally gravitated towards people I could see myself emulating. But and this is a concept I've heard before, is building your board of directors. So I had those people, right, that I felt comfortable with and I felt like I could see me in them. But I also specifically sought out people that were complete opposites of me too. So tough male partners that everyone was afraid of, because you have to work with those types of people too, and they're also successful. So I tried to make a conscious effort to get as many different perspectives on career paths as I could. And some of those male partners who were super scary to everyone else actually turned out being some of my best mentors, because they were the ones that were everyone else is asking for it, you should ask for it too. Why are you being so nervous about it? So I would say get as a diverse group as you can, but I started with the people that I said, in terms of mentoring and getting to a spot in my career, I try to pick people that I said, I could see myself being you in, 10, 20 years. So tell me about it. And don't be shy. I think Kristyn mentioned about networking. It's so important. And I'm always flattered when someone will email me or call me and say, can I have a half hour of your time? I'd love to pick your brain about career. I love that. I'm so flattered by it. So don't be afraid. People aren't going to say no. And if they do, screw them. But so don't be afraid to reach out, even if it's someone that you don't have that much experience dealing with or you don't know that well. People are flattered to be asked. So don't be shy.
I think something that you just said, I want to re-emphasize so it doesn't get lost. When you are seeking a mentor, it's not really a, hello, will you be my mentor kind of experience. It's more hey, can we get a coffee? You're really building a relationship that can become mentorship. Because if you go into it hello, I would like you to be my mentor, please tell me what to do, it's kind of off-putting to the person that you're asking versus just trying to develop that relationship. I think that's an important distinction. And then Rachel alluded to, now I'm at the point in my career where I'm looking around being who can I find to actively bring up? Oh, that person. Let me go see if that person wants me to take them to lunch, because I see something in them that I want to develop. So that's kind of a fun place to be. And then the last thing would be don't don't think that it's time for my children to be here. So if you see them, that's what you're saying. So I lost my train of thought. The last thing would be, Rachel also alluded to, don't assume that your mentor has to look like you. It doesn't have to be a female. It doesn't have to be someone from like your, I don't know, someone that looks like you, your socioeconomic status, your demographic status, right? It doesn't have to be someone that looks like you to be an effective mentor. And often it's people who don't look like you because they have diverse perspectives.
Great advice. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Chanel.
Okay, most of my questions have been answered. So I'll just make my comment. I'm really glad that I tuned into this webinar because all of you have discussed so many things that I've been thinking about and I'm in the middle of. I just turned 30 and a lot of things that some of the things that you've done, having to move for jobs and changing careers, I'm like right in the midst of it. And I went to school for one thing and I spent several years trying to pursue that and it went nowhere for me. So I had to switch gears from trying to pursue a specific career to, okay, I need to think about money now. So now I'm making a decision based on money and not so much as for what's going to make me happy. And so in the process, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what can I do that's going to make me happy in this career? Because what I had as an idea, it's not happening. You have a lot of people who they go to school for one thing and what they end up doing is so unrelated, or they can pull skills from that helps them in their career, but they really just do a 360. And so that's kind of where I am right now. But I appreciate everybody on this panel, and I'm so glad that I was able to tune in today.
Thank you. We're so excited you were able to be here. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. So I'm glad, first of all, I'm glad to see so many people on this call. It's pretty exciting. But I wanted to share with you too, because I actually had a point in time that so I came out of college and I was growing financially through my positions and the changes that I was making. And when I had the one position at the healthcare facility where I had about an hour commute, that was when the roads were dry, as Rachel mentioned. We live in areas where, we don't always have beautiful weather. And so the winters, it would take me an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. And so I was making the decision that I wanted to work closer to home. And what was that going to look like for me? And I had a number of positions that I had applied for. And the one my husband found was the one at the newspaper, found the lead on it. And when I interviewed for that, I actually went into it knowing that I was maybe going to take a pay cut, and it was significant. And then they came back, tried to get me to stay at the medical facility. They tried to get me to stay and threw another chunk of money at me that I walked away from, because at that point in my career, it wasn't about the money. It was about me wanting to start a family, but still be able to have something career-wise that was challenging to me at the time. So, it took me years to get back to where I was when I was there. But in the grand scheme of things, the money at the time wasn't significant to me. Things have changed. I've had other opportunities that have come to me, and because of my experience that I got, I was able to, kind of leapfrog further into careers, other positions as they came along. So don't get discouraged. There's a path out there for you that'll be the right one. It's a matter of turning over those leaves and looking for it, and again, being willing to step outside of your comfort zone. But I feel for you. If there's anything that we can do for you along the line, if you need guidance or input, even beyond this call, I put something in the chat, but any of you guys that want to talk beyond this, certainly willing and able to do so. So good luck to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Real quick, it is 7:30. So if any of you need to jump off, that's totally okay. But we do have one other question from Maya. So go ahead.
Oh, my question is, Miss, actually it's for Miss Beth and Miss Laura. Like your bond is like me and my mother's bond, like we're very close. So I wanted to ask, like, how can you all like get young women to be more outspoken and like to go after their career goals and not to be afraid of like taking risks and, you know, believing in themselves, because where I live, like a lot of women are not really that outspoken when it comes to their career goals. But for me, like I've learned that from an early age from my mom. My mom always told me, like, if you want to go out there and do something, you can. Don't let anybody tell you what you can and cannot do. I mean, I've been told all the time that, oh, I'm not going to amount to this and that because I have a learning disability and I work with people with disabilities. And I tell my coworkers all the time, don't let anybody tell you what you can and can't do because they're not in your shoes. They, you know, they're not living your life every day. And for me, I don't care what anybody thinks of me, you know, and I like the comment that Miss Rachel said, you know, if you can do anything you put your mind to, and don't let anybody career goals, you know, on a job or in school tell you what you can't do because, you know, they're not living your life. But I like the mother-daughter role that you and Miss Bethany, you and Miss Laura have, because it reminds me so much of my mom, because I just turned 30 and she's 67 and we get along so well. We are like best friends and I do everything with her. So my question is, like, how can we get more young women to be, you know, more vocal and to go after what they want?
Lauren, do you want to go first or you want me to?
Sure, I guess I'll go first. So, for me, I think personally, I find a lot of my motivation just from having my mom. Obviously, she's a great role model and has been for me ever since I was little. Seeing her continue to like go after it and kick ass, to be honest with you. While I was in school and she was still taking me to dance classes and volleyball practices and all these other things, I saw my mom as Superwoman basically when I was a kid. And as I've grown up, that's become, you know, we're like best friends. And so I've really tried to embrace the things that I've learned from my mom growing up and put them in other places and expand that. And I think that really the best way, I think, to help empower women is to connect with them. And there's so many ways to do that. This is a great example of a way to do that. That's why a lot of us are here, because it's something that we're passionate about. I've mentored people on campus. For example, Lauren Milhorn, Paige Williams, the two names you see on your screen. I have talked to them multiple times about so many different things and just connected with them. And, you know, we're friends, but I'm a year ahead of them in school. So we've had a lot of the same epiphanies. It's just that I've had them first. So, you know, sharing those experiences and connecting people with people, you know. I've had people come to me and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Do you know somebody that does that? I'm like, oh, hey, yeah, we have this one Westminster alum that I just talked to last week because I wanted to learn more about their job. You should connect with them. I'll introduce you. And it's really just about listening to them and helping them find their way. And I don't know, I guess that's the best way that I can say that empowerment really, really works. Mom, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, kind of on the backside of that. First of all, Lauren has made being a mom easy. She's always excelled. She's never been a headache as a child. She's been the perfect child, really, as perfect as children could be. That's been Lauren. I couldn't be more proud of her. We have always had hard work has just been something that we do in this house. So, you know, Lauren will have classmates that called off school because they didn't feel well or they just didn't feel like going to school that day. And literally in our house, unless you had a fever, you were throwing up, you'll get feeling better, take some aspirin and off you go. So,
I was the kid that faked being okay to go to school because I wanted to be at school.
I made her stay home. She cried because she was afraid she was going to miss something. But the biggest thing I guess I could say is just, you know, I'm real big about the carpe diem. Like today's the day, seize the day, the time is now. And anything you choose to do, you can do with hard work and dedication and perseverance. Sometimes we have to be resilient. We have to push through those moments of uncomfortness. We've talked about that. It's not easy. Nobody said it was going to be easy, but you know, the harder you work for it, the sweeter it is when you get there. And relying on the people around you, being them family, friends, mentors in your workplace, That becomes critical and key, both from a personal level as well as growing yourself professionally. So don't be afraid to lean on people. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Everybody's been in the same shoes that you've been in, and that you've felt the uncertainties that you feel. I still feel them from time to time. I think anybody that doesn't maybe just isn't stretching themselves enough. So you'll get there. And that's awesome that you guys have a great relationship, Maya. It's just, it's very precious.
Yeah, the
Precious.
bond that you and Laura have, Ms. Beth, it's great. It reminds me just of my mom. My mom's the same thing you just said. Is no staying at home, sick or no sick, you're going to school. And I'm the same way. Work, I don't care if I have a fever or I'm sick, I'm going to work, because I've seen my mom work, and she's in law enforcement. She still is. So I come from a law enforcement military family. My brother's in law. He's in the military. Well, he's okay. He's okay. We have our share of arguments. We're brother and sister, but we're very close to. Well, yeah. He's okay. He's okay. He's a good brother. He is. But me and my mom, she's like my best friend, and we do everything together. And and I've learned a lot of my hard working from her. Actually, she's in the other room doing her schoolwork now, and I help her with it. So it's just amazing to see mother-daughter dynamics. I think it's really good.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that about wraps us up for the night. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. We greatly appreciate you. And thank you to the rest of you who were able to join us tonight and ask some great questions. For future reference, most of this, we did have some technical difficulties at the beginning, and we're able to record all of it, but the majority of the session has been recorded and will be posted on our YouTube later, Youngstown Score, and you'll be able to watch it there. Any of you who are looking to make connections beyond this call, I did throw my email in the chat for you, and I'm happy to help make those connections. That about wraps us up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Organizing.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for
Yeah,
facilitating.
good night.